From Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition, we have the Deluxe Class Cliffjumper and Sideswipe. Now, you can notice Cliffjumper's box is really beat up. That's just the reality of finding these things at Walmart sometimes. I wasn't going to pick up Cliffjumper until I saw he was on really deep sale because of how beat up the box was, so that was cool. As for Sideswipe, this was going to be the last Gamer Edition figure I was going to pick up. I don't know, if I like it, then maybe I'll pick up more. I've heard some praise for this Sideswipe, I think it looks great, but just looking at the box in general, you can see Cliffjumper, we have his Fall of Cybertron render here on the side, we have the 5, and then on the back, they just outright lie, because they say this is from the Protect Omega Supreme mission. Cliffjumper wasn't in that level. Cliffjumper wasn't in that game. He was in Fall of Cybertron. Omega Supreme was only in War for Cybertron. As for Sideswipe, he actually is correct. You got the render here, and this is from specifically the Save Zeta Prime, which was the Kaon prison level. So, with all that said, let's actually open these guys up and take a look. Getting these both out of the box, and what I'll say is, I think they both look alright. Like, if you're just, like, putting them on a shelf and staring at them, they both do the job. A thing I'll point out, though, is that I actually paired these figures up for a reason. You see, not only is there a lore reason in Fall of Cybertron, Sideswipe is driving the ship that Cliffjumper and Jazz use as their evac, but there's also the fact that both of these are characters that have pre-existing figures. Cliffjumper had a War for Cybertron Deluxe, and then Sideswipe was a remold of the Fall of Cybertron Jazz. So, both of these also have options. We are looking potentially for upgrades or improvements, and I would say one of these is an upgrade, but not both. Looking at Cliffjumper first, and I do enjoy the head sculpt. It is accurate to the game. I wish the blue was maybe a little bit darker just to kind of pop out of the head more, but, you know, other than that, I think that's all fine. The painting is good throughout, sculpting's alright. In terms of articulation, though, is a bit rough. You have a ball joint at the head, ball joint at the shoulder, upper arm cut, you have a single elbow, you have a wrist hinge due to the transformation, you have a waist joint, upper leg cut, a very deep knee, and then an ankle that only goes out like that. You also might notice when you use the knee, you pop the leg out of place, which is always super fun. So you have a decent suite of articulation on Cliffjumper. In fact, my only real issue is that he's constantly hitting his own backpack. Don't get me wrong, the backpack is game accurate for what that's worth, but yeah, I do wish it wasn't quite as there. One of my big issues with the guns in this line is that the characters usually can't hold them. You can see there's a little handle here to where Cliffjumper could, but his arm gets in the way. And that's because Hasbro thought that this was an important gimmick. You can take the forearms off and replace it with guns. Now, I could hear someone say, that's what they do in the game. That's so cool. And sure, it might be cool, but I hate how it looks. I just want them to be able to hold the guns like they're guns. And you don't have the option here. Thankfully, they fixed that. A lot of the newer ones do have the option, but to me, that means these guns are worthless. The other part of it is you can't transform with them on, and I can guarantee you that in a few years' time, people are going to be selling these figures missing their forearms because they displayed them with the guns. At least you get the sword. The sword fits into the hand. Looks alright. Yeah, Cliffjumper just has too many issues for me. His legs don't feel great. His eyes kind of sink into his head. His accessories don't really work for me. Plus, at the end of the day, him and Bumblebee are just kind of meh because of how good their original figures were. Cliffjumper especially was one of my favorites, and this guy, he just doesn't hold a candle. Especially not when you have Sideswipe sitting right next to him. Maybe it's just Hasbro kind of learning from previous figures, but Sideswipe looks and feels so much better than Cliffjumper. In terms of articulation, you have a ball joint at the head, you have a ball joint at the shoulder, you have an upper arm cut and a deeper elbow, almost a double jointed elbow actually, just hits the tire. You have this wrist hinge there, you have waist, ball joint at the hip, upper leg cut as well as a knee, and then down here you can go back and forward at the ankle. No side to side, but at the very least they put the ankles at an angle so that you can get him in a proper A stance, make him look a little bit more natural. So the articulation is actually about the same as Cliff's, but it feels better and it's less impaired. Sure, he still has a backpack, in fact it might be a larger backpack than Cliffjumper's, but it doesn't get in the way of things, and again, it's game accurate. That's the thing that surprised me the most. What really helps though is just, he doesn't just become a sea of red like Cliffjumper. You have the silver and the grays and blacks throughout. He's a good looking figure. Alongside that, his gun, I think, looks so much better. This would have been the assault rifle within the game. If you just put it on the arm, boom, it just works like a normal rifle. But you can still do the gimmick. Boop. Here. He's a little bit tighter on Sideswipe. And because this one's a bit larger, I think it actually does look good switched out like that. It's always going to be my preference to give the forearm just a gun as opposed to actually switching them out. But at least it's there. It's an option that you can do either way. Whereas with Cliffjumper and Bumblebee and Optimus, you had to replace the arms if you wanted to use the gun. Here, come on, Sideswipe. Hold it for me. There you go. So, that's all great. Another thing I wanted to point out, I didn't even think about this until a friend of mine joked about it. If you have Cliffjumper's sword, then you can actually put it in Sideswipe's hand and hold it out. And if you remember in the game, every Transformer had a power. They could have a special ability. Sideswipe's was he would pull out a sword and then just make like a knife tornado, which you can kind of do with this figure if you really want to. You know, I don't think it was intended. I think it's just a happy accident. But I do think that's kind of funny, that out of every Transformer in the game, Sideswipe's the one that can technically do his ability. In robot mode, it's no contest. I do think Sideswipe's the better figure, but what about transformation in vehicle mode? This is a really bad transformation, so you can see, to try to help it out, I've had to pop off the shoulder pad and pop off the back, and even still, it's all relying on plastic flex, trying to get these big dumb forearms into the groove here, and it's just not wanting to work because everything's clashing into each other. Here, I'm gonna get it into the car mode. That was worse than Origins Wheeljack. Like, at least the robot mode here is better, but that transformation was terrible. Keep in mind, the Generations War for Cybertron Cliffjumper, the only complaint people really had about that mold was how bad the transformation was, and they've just amplified it here by making the pieces smaller, making them sharper, and make it to where they have even less clearance. Just to be clear here, that's a lie. That popped off, and it won't pop back on, because every time you're moving something on this toy to try to get something back in the position, something new pops out. There. I got it close, but check it out. In doing that, I've made the shoulder and this pop out. It is a finicky mess of a toy, and it gives you a car mode that is okay. I mean, I like it for nostalgia reasons, but I wouldn't call it good, and it definitely wasn't worth what it took to get here. Let's just hope Sideswipe is better, man. Sideswipe's transformation does have some frustrating bits to it. There is still a lot of tabs and panels, but once you get into the groove of it, I think it flows very well. It's a case where the first transformation is going to be rough, but it does make sense once you really get into the meat of the matter. Alongside that, I do really enjoy this vehicle mode. I think it's a great Cybertronian car. It rolls well, looks decently well. Alongside that, pulling out both the cars back in, you do have weapon storage in these modes. For Sideswipe, we can put the assault rifle right here on the top. There we are. And then as for Cliff, okay, I'm going to try to find a spot for everything. We're going to put the gun up here. Oh, the panels are coming undone just for me doing this. Awesome. And then we'll put the sniper rifle back here. And we'll put the sword right here. So yeah, you can get weapon storage across the mode for all weapons. I think that looks pretty good. Again, I think it's kind of unfair to put Cliffjumper next to Sideswipe, but I really do enjoy how Sideswipe turned out. Not like my absolute favorite Sideswipe ever or anything, but I could look at this and say that is a good attempt on that character. Also, I just want to say this. It's a case where the car mode looks good all the way around. And even look at that, his chest ends up back here. And even up from the bottom, it's decently clean. So, yeah, taken with this Sideswipe. Transforming back to robot mode, Sideswipe does have a couple of panels that can get a little bit stiff, but I do think that that's a better transformation actually. It feels even smoother going back to the robot. As for Cliffjumper, following the instructions to the letter, mind you, as much as I can with how crap the modern directions are, the backpack fell off, and the shoulder pad fell off. Again. Yay. As if I needed another good thing to say about this figure, I'd also say that Gamer Edition Sideswipe looks really good with Bumblebee Sunstreaker. Keep in mind, Bumblebee Sunstreaker never showed up in the movie. He is concept art. Yeah, I totally buy that this guy was designed for the movie and not just to sell more toys. But he does look more like a War for Cybertron character than a Bumblebee character to my eye, and I think he looks phenomenal with Sideswipe. As it stands right now with Gamer Edition, there are 3 figures I would ever recommend: Optimus Prime, Starscream, and Sideswipe. I think they are all phenomenal figures. Honestly, I think Sideswipe is as good for a deluxe as Optimus was for a Voyager. A phenomenal little figure. As for Cliffjumper, he can go kick rocks. By the way, Cliffjumper, your sword belongs to Sideswipe now.